Hello, Chris Guthrie here, and in this episode, we'll be speaking with Steve, who is a product photographer. And so this episode is going to be a little bit different than normal. We normally have on e-commerce guests, but I wanted Steve to come on because I've known him for a while, and he's talking about today in this episode about how to improve your product photography. So whether this is something you do yourself or you decide to hire a third party to help you out. So I think you'll enjoy this episode. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Chris Guthrie here, host of Sellercast, and today I have Steve on the podcast. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, I've known you for quite a while, Steve. We've met, and we always seem to meet up at the various events
Yes.
that sellers are at. And so it's nice to bring you onto the podcast as well. So thanks for coming.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I know that you're involved in the Amazon selling side, but primarily as a photographer. And so you do photography for people that are doing photos for their listings, et cetera. How did you actually get into that? And then what I'd really like to focus today on is just how the people that are listening can do their own photos and get the best results. And I know that some people that are further along, maybe they'll want to hire a photographer like yourself or someone else to do as well. But let's go with that to start.
Well, when I started joining ASM4, and I needed photography for my own products. And as I was searching for a photographer, I actually found a person that I used to work with that was a professional photographer on the side. So I asked him for services regarding product photos, and he came back with some excellent work. And I started promoting him within to other Amazon sellers. And then we just decided to partner up because the demand was so high. And so I knew that if he did good work for me, he would do good work for others as well. So we ended up partnering after that. And here we are today.
Cool. And so then if people are listening, and especially if they're lower budget, they might want to maybe they want to do their own photos to start out. I know obviously you'd say maybe don't do that, but what would you suggest people do if they're trying to get their photos of their products? I mean, are people looking at other listings and then using that as a guide, or are they trying to do something entirely new? Maybe you can talk about the process that you use, and they can apply that to their own situation.
Sure. The process that I use is really understanding the product and the functionality behind the product and the benefit behind it. So I actually sit down and look at a product and write down all the different functions, which I really call use cases, and the benefits that the product provides. Usually, those actually are going to be used in your bullet point listings anyway, so you're not really doing more work. Once those use cases really are defined and you have a clear idea of what your product can do, then I sit down and say, okay, this is the basis for my product photo. Now, with that planning comes in mind, do you want to do all white background, which your main image has to be in white background anyway. But the rest of them, do you want all white background, or do you want lifestyle, action, product, and use photos? And so that's the process that I go through in defining every one of those steps. Usually, this is the longest part. Usually, I sit down and revert to one or two white field photos, and then the rest will be lifestyle photos.
Mm-hmm. And so when deciding how to do lifestyle, is it really just as basic as, okay, this is what the products say, it's a barbecue grill scraper, you're going to do a photo of the grill scraper in action on a grill, basically?
Yes.
Okay. And then what about making sure that, well, how actually would they do this? I mean, is it just like get a friend type of thing, or what would you suggest if they're trying to do it themselves?
First of all, I would say you do have to have a decent camera, because your resolution has to be relatively high. But just as I would say, trying to keep the image as authentic as possible, just as if you were using it. Yes, you do go hire either a family member or some friends that are willing to do this with you, because a lot of times it does require two people. So in the case of a grill brush, you actually would go out and either use your own barbecue grill, and it really doesn't matter what kind of grill it is, but enough big enough that people know that there's a barbecue grill in the picture. And then a couple of poses would be you holding the brush and actually doing a slow scraping motion, because if you go too fast, obviously the image will be blurred. But you really want to show, in that case, like the photo of you actually using it, or And at that point, you could include zoom out of the image where you include the actual person and the model, or you could do it up close where you're just focused really on the brush touching the grill.
Okay, and so I know that you've probably worked with a lot of clients that have had either the photos they've done originally, or maybe they just did a couple of photos and they didn't actually fill up every slot.
Sure.
And so, do you see like a conversion bump when people do just better photos or they change their photos? I'm assuming it obviously can affect things, but I'm wondering what you've noticed in terms of what's been the biggest impact on a conversion rate.
Sure. So that data is very hard to collect because we actually don't own the photos and we don't really ask for sales data from our clients, at that. But right now we are starting to ask for that data for some of the newer customers so that we establish a baseline of conversions. In my own case, I've actually looked back to the data early on when I had my photos done and I replaced a couple images. I actually did see a bump in my conversion rates. I can't tell you exactly what the numbers are, but you could see a steady incline in those 3 months where I did update the photos.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that most people they get their photos done, and then, well, especially if they've already if they've done them themselves, maybe they think about updating them once later, and then that's about it.
Right.
And people aren't really changing that often. Do you work with people that are changing their photos fairly frequently and really trying to nail that down? Or I mean, I know that anytime you're changing an element on your page, whether it's your title, bullet points, description, images, etc., it's going to have a potential impact on the conversion. But there are so many other variables as well, such as the traffic that happens to be coming to your product at that time, etc. So you have to kind of see it over a longer period of time. I'm guessing that that's just maybe what you suggest is try the photos and then have them running for a specific period of time, and then maybe try a different main photo. And I'm assuming, of course, the main photo is going to be the biggest influence on that conversion because it's the one that people see by default. But what would you suggest if people are trying to do some testing with their photos?
Sure. The biggest thing is establishing a baseline in your conversion rate, and
Hmm.
most people really miss that point. So as soon as if you have an existing listing and you upload your photos, take down what your conversion number is at that point in your Seller Central backend account or account backend. Then from there, it's about adjusting the variable. I usually tell people to let it run for about 30 days, and then we'll reevaluate, collect the data after 30 days. So
So to jump in there, actually, so you said that you asked them for 30 days. Do they come back to you and then occasionally you reshoot new photos based on what that data
no,
comes up, or not yet?
no, not yet.
Okay.
We're just at a point where I just want the conversion at 30 days and see if the photos actually made a difference. Now,
Yeah, that makes sense.
right. So now the hard part there is if you change other things in your listings, then we can't really tell what really caused the increase in conversions. I
Yeah.
actually have two examples of this. We do occasionally see people who want to update their photos. A lot of customers have white background photos as their initial launch. And then after a while, customers come back and say, "Hey, I'd like to do product and use photos and really kind of set myself apart from the competition."
Mhm.
So we do see that. We don't really see too many people changing their lifestyle photos or action photos. Once they get them, we generally provide a little bit, couple more images than what the Amazon listing slots have space for. So they have a couple extras to swap in and out to test out. So we don't really see that too much. Now, in the other case, we recently had a client that we're working with. Actually, we're still working with this client where we changed some colors on the product and it actually decreased his conversion rate according to him. So he was, I would say, he did, let's say 30 units a day. Once we updated that main image to a new color, a new position, he saw that his conversion rate dropped and he wasn't having as many sales. He swapped out that new image, put in his old main image, and sales got back to normal again. So that does happen. It just really depends on how good either the angle, the position, whatever it is on your main image. The other part that we see right now is clients actually using a product in use photo as their main image. Now,
Mhm.
that really is against the Amazon terms and conditions for photo requirements, uh, just to know that. But people do that because then the product in use and lifestyle photo will show up as their main image during the when you do search results.
Yeah, it's one of those. That's the thing that I constantly hear from sellers is just across the board over the last several years of talking to people that sell on Amazon is that it's just there are these varying areas of Amazon that people just knowingly, maybe not knowingly, but they are breaking the rules
Sure.
of what Amazon says. But then since they don't see anyone getting punished or they see other seller doing it, then people start to do that. We saw this with HTML and product listings,
Right.
people doing full images for their product descriptions.
Right.
And then Amazon eventually makes a change if they don't like that. So it's kind
Sure.
of a that's kind of an interesting thing. I'm assuming that you just tell your clients to do the white background since that's the actual rules on Amazon.
Yes, we actually, try to abide by the terms of service no matter what we can. But from our perspective, we just can't control what the eventual seller is going to upload
Yeah,
to their
that makes
listing.
sense.
So, because from a copyright standpoint, once the photos are delivered to the client, they own the copyright. They could do whatever they want with it because they've paid for the
Yeah,
service.
yeah, it makes sense. I mean, that's the same thing. People ask me something, and I'm like, well, I wouldn't do that, and I would suggest you don't. But then
Yes,
they might do it anyways.
right, right. So the same in that context, the same goes with text. Adding text to images is it's not really against the terms of service, but we just don't do that because for a variety of reasons. And at the end of the day, that's we kind of categorize that more as a graphic design skill set, not necessarily a photography skill set. So
Mhm.
usually we will not, even if you ask us to put text on the images, we definitely will not do that.
Okay. And even going back to some of that earlier example you gave, though, of a seller that swapped out a photo and saw a decrease in
Sure,
conversions. I mean, I think the biggest takeaway for people that are listening, especially if you've been selling on Amazon for some time, is that if you haven't changed your images yet or even tried to change them, that you really should,
sure,
because you might have the opposite effect and have an increase in sales, and that might be just the only thing you've done.
right,
And so with any business, especially with selling on Amazon, you've got to be testing and then running tests, and of course don't do too many variables. Well, actually, only do one variable at once, like say changing your main image,
right.
because too many things at once, you don't know what caused the influence in conversions. So
Yep, and I would agree with that. And it's a pretty difficult task to decide which image it actually was. So that's always,
yeah,
I mean, it really is a trial and error, but you really can't do. I guess look at it from a scientific perspective. Is that if you change too many variables, you're definitely going to not know one or two. You'll be able to narrow down if that caused an effect or not.
yeah, yeah. I know we kind of just jumped right into the meat of it, talking about just the various aspects of doing images, changing images, and what may influence them. Let's take a step back. So, if someone's launching a new product. What should they do? Should they focus on writing their sales copy, or should they take photos of their products first and then match the photos to their sales copy, or what do you suggest to people?
I would say work on your sales copy first because
Mhm.
that's where the real idea comes from at the end of the day. So you get all your keywords researched and really think about the benefits and the features you really want to display or you really want to put in your listing that would make people want to buy. At the end of the day, one of the mentors heard, "Hey, every product solves a specific problem," and that's the key takeaway that I use in a lot of these product photos. So if you have a good listing, then that'll make your job easier in taking photos for your product.
Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I think that even going back to when you mentioned the features, advantages, and benefits, I think back to college years. I had a professor that because had a degree in marketing that talked about. There's this book that we had to read, and that before that time, I hadn't been familiar with copywriting process and how you should use features, advantages, and benefits. If I can find that book title again, because the book was great and helped change some of my thinking, I just forget the title. If I can find that, I'll mention that in the show notes here for people that want to check that out as well. If if you've never sold anything before, or you haven't done your listing copy before, and you're looking for ideas on how to frame it, then that can help. But we also did another episode earlier on, and I'll link to that as well about copywriting, so you can check that out too if you're getting started. Let's talk about some of these lifestyle and action photos. Obviously, if you're doing it, you need to have a second person. Um, are you suggest like have you found a difference in the different types of models, or if people are involved, or whether or not you just do a photo of the product itself? Or I'm assuming it kind of comes down to what product you're selling.
Right. So I think what makes the most sense is using actual models in your photos. And because at the end of the day, we're trying to, I mean, you and I are both consumers. And so we're trying to figure out whether this product will solve our problem or if it's the right fit for our particular needs. And since we can't touch them or feel them or anything like that, it's usually best to depict as much of the real life as possible in the image. So what I would recommend you do is really get a model to demo your product, and that person holds still or in the action of using the product, and then you can take the picture of that. Now let's get down to models. Everyone, whenever I go out hunting for or searching, let's just say searching for models, searching,
Bag the model
yeah,
today.
searching for models. Now that could be babies, men, women, anybody. Um,
Yeah.
uh, a lot of times people think that you have to be like the Hollywood runway models in order to do product photography. And the answer is no. And that's not what we do. Um, Now, having said that, it does matter in the model you select because you do have to match that person up with the particular product. Meaning, at the end of the day, the photo has to be believable. So, you're not going to take a baby product and have two adults model it. Like it's right. I mean, that just doesn't make sense. So, and it's not believable. People just kind of laugh at that. And so, you really want to select who that person you think would be the target demographic that would use that particular product. Now, cell phone cases, we see a couple cell phone cases come our way that could be a wide range. It could be, and that's probably the most versatile the product could be, senior citizens, it could be children, high school kids, teenagers, it could be adults, just I guess middle-aged adults. So that you have some flexibility. But baby products is a good example. You're really not going to have a 5-year-old kid or an adult model baby product. So I would say use your
Yeah.
best judgment on that. Uh,
How are you finding these models then, right? Are you using something? I was going to say Craigslist, but maybe that could end up with a weird scenario potentially.
right, right.
Need a model for this product, or are there websites, or is it just like find your Facebook profile and then see who most matches my target
Right.
demographic and invite them out
Sure,
for?
sure. I do it really. I do it really simple. I actually look through some friends, or I usually have friends of friends, and look at their pictures, and then or I have people in mind that I know that I've either worked with, or are friends with, or somebody I've read into have a connection with at one point in time. So that's generally how I find the models. In fact, this last time we actually went to my partner and I went to a vendor fair of outdoor wildlife equipment. And there was a girl there that was selling her products as a vendor. And we just thought, hey, you know what? She might be a good fit for some of our products when we get there. So we just asked her, hey, you interested in being a model we have an Amazon business, a photography business, and this is why we would need you. It's kind of weird at first, but at the same time, like it's credible. We show it's a little nerve wracking for people, but you just have to kind of frame it right for them. I usually,
Yeah,
yeah, I usually don't say, "Hey, you want to be a model? Come work with us." That usually doesn't work. You usually you have to tell them that, "Hey, this is for an Amazon listing, and it's for a product. It's going to be shown worldwide. We may also use you for a Facebook ad. Are you interested?" Believe it or not, some people say no because they just don't want that exposure to the public.
yeah,
Um, eh,
makes sense.
yeah,
One question actually too. Then are
sure.
you? I mean, I know because a friend of mine has a photography business that's based in the Seattle area as
Sure.
well, and he has model release forms occasionally when he does that. I mean, would you suggest people do that as well, getting a model release form in terms of using their likeness, etc.? Or I mean, even I guess if it's a friend, it's kind of like, well, but you never
Right.
know what may happen.
Right, right. If it's a one-time deal, I wouldn't worry about it too much. By the way, I'm not a lawyer, so what I
Yes, it's
do
kind of a legal question.
right, but what I do is if it's a one-time deal, I definitely, say probably get away with that. But if it's like a continuous, you're doing it all the time with people you don't know, or even if you feel uncomfortable with people you do know, definitely have a model release form, as I would say, because you never know what could happen in the future. I mean, your imagination can run wild on the legal ramifications of that, but you just want to protect yourself at the end of the day because you're a business at that point. And if anybody sues you for this thing, yeah, who knows what could happen. So I would definitely say yes.
Yeah, yeah, all the different typical disclaimers. Obviously, do your own due diligence.
Right.
But so let's talk about the actual photo process too. Maybe some of the equipment. I mean, are you, if someone's doing this themselves, are they? Most people are they're using their iPhone or their Android phone, etc., and they're taking photos, or are they maybe hitting up the friend for a DSLR,
Right.
Canon or something?
Right. I mean, the new cell phones, the new iPhones and the Galaxy phones have some pretty good cameras on them. So you could probably get away with, a cell phone camera. But in most cases, in our case, actually, we use a Canon 5D Mark III, and that's a high end camera. But I would say that any DSLR will work as long as you have the correct lighting and the proper environment to shoot the picture in. I believe early on when we were doing just a white background photos, we had a little light tent set up, and all we used was I think it was a Minolta. This is my partner. I think he had a Minolta point and shoot, really, and you would
Hmm.
you would never know the difference because it wasn't this high powered camera. It was just a midline point and shoot, and we had some happy customers on that.
Let's actually touch on that briefly, the lighting aspect. So I know if you're doing like a light box, and that's a separate piece of equipment you need
Sure.
to set up and all that. Uh, so very briefly, is that something where, well, if someone's doing it themselves, would you? I'm assuming that maybe outside's best because then you can just use obviously outside light. Is there like a best time of day or a certain type of weather that's better for taking photos outside?
Sure. For us, in general, daytime is the best, I would say. Mid morning to I would say late afternoon. If it's too sunny out, you might just get overexposure.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't even say in direct sunlight doesn't always work either because you're really trying to preserve the color in the image compared to the actual product. If you do it in the dark, your image can be really grainy, so that doesn't work.
Yeah,
Right.
unless the product, of course, is relevant
Right,
to the darkness. But yeah,
right, right. And we recently had that where a recent product required some weather, and that was really tough to shoot because the weather changes constantly. So I think you just have to compensate for that. But in most cases, we really like to shoot in the daytime, just because we have a little bit more control and flexibility. If the shot doesn't look right, we're not in a mad rush because sunlight's going down.
yeah.
We've had those kind of cases where sun's going down. It's like, man, we got to hurry.
Are you so? What about other uses for the photos? I mean, are people doing different photos for different variations, or are they just kind of using Photoshop and doing color replacement type of stuff for if they're doing different photos of different products type of thing?
So up until now, a lot of our customers have been, one time. We do have some returning customers, but that's based on new products. I mean, these are images that you could pretty much use anywhere. So it's really up to you to decide if you want to use it for a website or a landing page. That's probably, you could do all that stuff. Or if you want to use it for a Facebook ad, you could do all that stuff. Instagram as well.
Yeah,
But reuse for variations is kind of tough because at the end of the day it boils down to cost, and people can use them for your variations. I mean, it might not be the same color, but that's all part of the which if you want to do that you can do that. Changing colors on an image of the product just digitally, I mean, you could do that with a lot of these big companies like Fiverr or Upwork and all those kind of places. You probably send them over and they can do that stuff for you.
yeah, definitely. What about? I think that maybe we're getting near the end here, but I want to focus primarily on just some of the mistakes that you see when you look at listings. So I'm assuming that, you have clients come to you, you look at their existing photos, and obviously they're coming to you because, well, either if they already have existing photos, they maybe are not seeing the results that they want with their sales.
Sure.
And so you're trying to reverse that. What are the most common mistakes that you see people that are doing their own photos?
I really see the people just have white background photos and they just don't know where to start for lifestyle or action photos. That's probably the most common that I see. And that it's the image part of it is relatively new, that I think some people just don't even think that, hey, maybe product and use photos would be good,
Yeah.
The other part I see that we fixed some is that the angle in which the image was shot did not display the product properly. And you don't think about that, but there are a couple photos that I've seen where I was asked, the question I ask is, what are we selling here? What does this look like? And if you can't answer that question based on the image, or if somebody else asks that question based on the picture, then you need to retake that shot, because nobody should be able to ask that question if it's especially on a listing. Should be able to see it right away and be like, oh, okay, we're selling a bracelet, or okay, we're mattress pads. I mean, some products are hard, right? Mattress pads are one of those. We've seen a couple of mattress pads, sheets, those kind of like bed sheets. Those are really hard. But at the end of the day, people should know that, hey, you're selling bed sheets or you're selling a mattress pad.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's a good question to ask is, does this, what am I selling? And is it instantly recognizable?
Correct.
What problem this product solves,
right.
for example.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Is there anything else that you suggest people that are looking at taking their own photos just to try and get the best results possible?
It's usually lighting, and I think lighting and the features of the product. Those are two things. Now, lighting is really hard, so it might take you a couple times, or some trial and error to get that done, or to really perfect that. But I would say, I spend most of my time when helping clients is the features, like really getting the features out of them. And so I would say if you can identify your features of what you want to show, you're probably about, I would say, 80% there.
All right. Thanks, Steve, for coming on to talk about product photography. I think especially if people are newer sellers, then some of the tips on how to improve the photos they do for their listings is great. And so for those that have already been doing photos for a while, then that's maybe picked up a few tips as well. And likewise, if you have any questions, I'll put the link to the show notes here in a bit. Feel free to post them, and Steve can chime in if you have any suggestions on how to improve your photos, and he can jump in there as well. So thanks again, Steve, for coming on and talking to us about product photography.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, and that was the episode with Steve. Hopefully you enjoyed that on product photography and picked up a few tips that you can apply to your own business. And likewise, too, I think the biggest takeaway is that if you're already selling on Amazon and you have been for quite some time and you haven't changed your images for your product, that's one of the first things you could consider testing if you haven't done that recently. So that's a great takeaway. And also, if you want to check out Steve's website, you can go to slantedframephoto.com. And the show notes link is sellercast.com/31. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.